Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Oh, this is loudspeaker. Okay, okay, cool. Wasn't expecting that, but that's awesome. My name is Sumona. So today, I want to invite you to take a moment, keep your phones down if you can, except if you're recording, which is fine, and close your eyes. And I want you to imagine this. You're just done with a long day at work. You're so excited to go back home. So you exit from your office building. As you step out of your building, you look up at the sky. It's a serene evening. You look to your left, and there's a beautiful highway filled with autonomous cars, all futuristic looking. You look to your right, and there's a stream of smart buildings with a hyper-connected infrastructure. Scale up those buildings and see the top floor. It's a penthouse. Zoom in through the window. A young girl walks into her bedroom and asks her AI-powered virtual assistant that looks like a little teddy bear for a bedtime story, as usual. But instead of hearing a fairy tale, she hears a voice whispering insidiously. If you love your father, make sure he doesn't go to work tomorrow, or something bad might happen. Little did she know a war was on its way. And it wasn't just the city's computing systems that the enemy targeted. It was the mind of the little daughter of the city's chief information security officer. Open your eyes. If you were the CISO, how would you react? How would you respond at an attempt to influence or recruit your child into a cyber attack? Do you think that would even be possible? Why not? So let me take you into a little journey, showing you why this isn't just a potential reality, but a very recent past. By show of hands, how many of you have heard of Jax Teixeira? Okay, not many. Teixeira was a 21-year-old employee of the Massachusetts Air National Guard. In 2023, this year, he was arrested by the FBI for leaking top secret sensitive Pentagon files on US military operations online onto a gaming chat group filled with teenage boys who were fascinated by war. After intense interrogation, it seems that Teixeira had no real reason for leaking this information, except that he wanted to show off. He wanted to feel like a valuable and important member and establish himself as a valuable asset in his gaming community. Just in 2021, among 17 children who were arrested on accounts of terrorism, the youngest was 13 when he was first radicalized. This boy was sentenced. He was a leader of a banned neo-Nazi terrorist group that glorified racist mass murder. As lonely adolescents, the story of Teixeira and this 13-year-old aren't disquieting for its uniqueness, but for its part in a growing pattern. Both described as estranged from family, socially isolated, and emotionally underdeveloped, left them highly susceptible to manipulative messaging that finally seemed to give their lives some meaning. Social engineering accounts for above 90% of all cyber crimes. That's insane. Some form of social engineering. Why? Because no matter how secure our security systems are, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And that link, that's the human. And the human mind is extremely powerful, but also fragile. Technical systems have their defenses, walls are built, codes are encrypted, firewalls are set, but what about the humans who oversee design and actually develop our systems? The brain doesn't come with a password, and there are hardly any security patches for human vulnerability. We have lived in this fear of nuclear warfare for a few decades, but modern warfare has taken a new turn, which is not necessarily a mushroom cloud at the horizon, but more likely to be a silent invasion. A battle that's fought not just in cyberspace, but in the very synapses of our brains. For example, instead of traditional warfare, a country may be a target of an attack during elections or during legislations around key national interests. As cybersecurity focuses on securing networks, devices, and systems, cognitive security is about preserving the sanctity of one of the most powerful computers ever made, the human brain. This graph is what drove my passion for cognitive security into a mission. Technological debt is the gap between the rate of advancement of technology, and the human adaptability curve. As this gap increases, so do complexities, and so do vulnerabilities, and they're all increasing exponentially. If we don't do something to close this gap of technological debt, this debt will soon become unpayable. And it's not just a debt of finance or technology. It's a debt of autonomy, our truths, of security, of our perception of reality as a whole that can so easily be manipulated. I've been trying to understand the fragility of the human brain for a long time and what makes it so, because we need to answer that question to start figuring out a solution. One of the most glaring evidences of this problem is a rising epidemic, not just COVID, but of a severely declining state of psychological well-being. But what is causing such an amplification of this decline? We've always known the human mind is fragile, but in the last 10 years, the rates have skyrocketed. So we decided to try and figure out the solution and answer this question. And as soon as we did it, we were faced with a challenge. The increase in human fragility is directly correlated to the decline in psychological states. But there is no way to actually visualize or quantify this decline, or what we call the downward spiral. So at MindShield, we developed a 6-parameter framework to do exactly this, to identify, visualize, and then help assess the downward spiral of the mind that can leave individuals highly vulnerable to cyber attacks and social engineering. But before getting into the framework, I want to give you some context. This whole theory is based on a very powerful yet very simple idea. I was trying to bash my head against the wall, trying to figure out. I had reached like a mental block in my research, and then one day, this stood glaring into my face randomly when I was at a walk in a park with a friend of mine. My friend had been in a car accident that had shattered his hip and his left leg, and so he was on a crutch. I asked him how he was doing, and he said he was doing pretty okay, but he didn't really have much hope that he was going to walk without a crutch anymore. It was like, that's sad, but okay. But why? The thing is, I knew that his accident was 6 years ago. I knew he had been in therapy for a very long time. So why did he believe this? And he looked at me, and he said, well, first, I don't like exercising as much as I have to. And secondly, my therapist has said that I can walk on both legs, but as soon as I start to use my left leg, it hurts. I haven't used that leg in so long, my muscles are weakened, and so it's way too painful. I'd rather just use the crutch for now. It's convenient. My brain took some time to process this logic, because even though the crutch was giving him relief in the short term, he had started developing ailments in his right leg, knee pressure, back pain. It was further hindering his ability to move. My friend was trapping himself. That's when it clicked. When someone is unequipped, to deal with situations such as fear, trauma, loneliness, anxiety, fear, and they don't have a supportive environment to do so, psychological well-being starts developing fractures. The mind is like water. It wants to take the path of least resistance to get what it needs. So in some desperate attempt to maintain some sense of well-being, a person recruits what we call psychological compensation. Psychological compensation occurs when someone with a fractured psyche compensates using alcohol, drugs, but most rampantly and most accessibly, technology, many of which, as we know, are designed for addiction. Though it gives some sense of well-being in the short run, as the dependency on the crutch increases, it starts fracturing and increasing the fractures of the psyche even more, turning it into a trap. I was most fascinated by studying how technology, especially virtual social technologies like social media, were creating this trap. And so came the working model of cyber psychological compensation. We have some amazing psychologists in the cognitive psychology field, one of them being Carol Reef, who conceptualized the 6 dimensions of a healthy psyche. We have self-acceptance, autonomy, positive relationships, environmental mastery, personal growth, and a sense of purpose. When these 6 dimensions are in the positive, a person is said to have a healthy psyche, which also means they're more resilient. But as soon as one of these dimensions start developing fractures, it's very easy for the compensation to kick in. And then the trap begins. For example, and cyber-psychological compensation is what's causing an increase in fractures and an increase in vulnerability, just to put that out there. For example, autonomy. When someone's sense of trust in their own judgment or autonomy is fractured, algorithmic determinism takes its place, which is not bad to a degree, right? But what happens when humans start relying on technology as a source of truth, which is what's happening right now? Their ability to decipher misinformation and manipulation gets impaired. Imagine this. A young boy, traumatized in life, lonely, escapes into his phone, scrolling through algorithmically driven content continuously, pulling him easily into information echo chambers that reinforce certain beliefs and perceptions, further increasing the trap, eventually leading to a state where he is so emotionally susceptible that polarized narratives and divisive narratives can be easily introduced, and he can be radicalized. Like the 13-year-old, the story of the 13-year-old we mentioned earlier. Self-acceptance. When the most primal human need to be socially accepted is fractured, social validation takes its place, and now that's happening through virtual platforms, activities, and virtual identities which are now anonymous. How easy can this be? Somebody who has experienced constant failure in his professional and personal life finally experiences some sense of victory, success, and influence as he gets problematically engrossed in multiplayer online games. When someone depends so much on social approval for their own self-esteem, they become an easy target to conformity think, to group think, to peer pressure. They become an easy target for emotional manipulation, as well as carrying out dubious acts just to gain social status, like Jack Teixeira. Or something we all know really well, healthy relationships. When someone has fractured or non-existent real-world relationships, they compensate through virtual ones. And there's a rising trend in virtual AI bot relationships, AI girlfriends, AI boyfriends. What is this doing? How is this eroding face-to-face human connection. As this kind of human connection erodes, empathy decreases. Dehumanization of outgroup increases. Isolation and loneliness increases. For the time constraints, I'm only pointing out 3 out of the 6, but you can now see how that goes. So environmental mastery, compensated through environmental control. Virtual reality, augmented reality, see what that can do to the space. Personal growth through reward addiction, the dopamine trap. And purpose through digital escapism, which is a whole new topic to uncover. The worst problem is that these are all reinforcing loops. As the dependency on the compensatory cycle increases, the core dimensions start atrophying, like the weak muscles of the leg. Not just that, but each dimension of the human psyche amongst the 6 are interconnected. So as one starts collapsing, they can all start collapsing, like dominoes, if there's no intervention, leading to a state where someone is living highly fractured and simply as a puppet. When we talk about the downward spiral, this is the spiral we are talking about. At the bottom of the cognitive risk spiral, we are dealing with highly vulnerable individuals, primed for cyber attacks and social engineering. So at MindShield, we created this nonprofit to further our research, to seed and find a way to reverse this cycle and reverse engineer it into the cognitive resilience cycle. Now, I'm sure the looming question is, what happens if we don't do this? If the cognitive risk spiral is allowed to manifest at the rate at which it's manifesting right now, the implications on national security are immense. We are talking wide-scale manipulation, civil unrest, polarization, erosion of social cohesion, social trust, trust in authority. We're already seeing signals of that right now. A country can today be brought to its knees and crippled without raising a single gun. Psychological operations are now faster, cheaper, and far more scalable than any weapon out there. And critically, it's anonymous. So what do we do? How do we protect ourselves? This is a great question. First, we should be asking, when do we protect ourselves? And the answer was 10 years ago. We are already late to the party. We are already playing catch up. But we can catch up. And it starts with, at the core level, building engaging, effective, and scalable initiatives that alert, train, and educate human mind and behavior to be cyber resilient. Cognitive security needs to be implemented at every level. We need to start by training individuals strategically how to identify their fractures, how to recognize misinformation and manipulation. We need to do this through very carefully designed educational workshops, but education is slow. It takes time. We need to develop technologies that have real-time interventions in solving this problem, and that's what MindShield is trying to do right now. But it's not a one-man job. It's not a one-company job. And so I ask you, how can we, with the brilliant minds present here who care and are so passionate about this, build this new defense for our citizens? Cognitive security has to be established as a global standard within cybersecurity. We have to act now, not just for our safety and for the safety of our country, but for the safety of our children and for that little girl who simply wanted a bedtime story. Thank you.